Welcome, weary traveler of time and thought. You've found your way back to the sleepy historian, where the hours grow slower, voices soften, and the ancient world unfolds in gentle rhythm. If this kind of boring history for sleep helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off to the same quiet stories. Tonight, we're wandering back to ancient Greece, but not the Greece of heroes and battles. Not the clamor of warships or the thunder of gods. No, this is a quieter world. One of forgotten festivals, rural rituals, and softly glowing torches beneath the olive trees. The kind of history that once pulsed with life and laughter, yet now sleeps beneath layers of dust and time. This is a tale of people, not kings or philosophers, but the ordinary souls who once gathered under open skies to honor their gods, to feast, to dance, to mark the turning of seasons. Some of these festivals were joyous, full of song and light. Others were somber, touched by mystery or even sorrow. But all were woven into the slow rhythm of ancient life, the pulse of planting and harvest, the coming of winter, the endless turning of the sun. Imagine yourself there, if you like. The night air is warm and filled with the faint hum of cicadas. Torches sway in gentle hands. The smell of roasted grain and sweet wine drifts through the village. Somewhere in the distance, a priest murmurs an ancient prayer, his voice almost blending with the wind that sighs across the fields. This is soft-spoken history documentary, not to excite, but to soothe. A calm bedtime storytelling experience designed for those who find peace in the slow unspooling of old stories. The kind of relaxing history to fall asleep to, where the details of a vanished world flow quietly through your mind until sleep folds them into dreams. Across the next 2 hours, we'll explore 4 gentle paths through this forgotten landscape of Greek celebration. We'll begin with the daily rhythm of life, how ordinary people prepared for and experienced these sacred days. Then, we'll follow the footsteps of one particular figure whose story has lingered in myth and memory, a priestess whose devotion defined an era. From there, we'll drift toward the mysteries and archaeological whispers, tracing what remains of secret rites and silent ruins. And finally, we'll glance upward to the banquets of the elite, the contrast between peasant and patrician, and how even luxury once bowed to the gods. Each story will unfold slowly, carefully, like a candle burning low in a quiet room. There will be no rush, no sudden turns, just the steady hum of history, soft and sure, carrying you backward across centuries. So if you're ready, dim the lights. Let the gods whisper. Let the myths unfold. And together, let's drift back to the forgotten festivals of the ancient Greeks. Before every festival in ancient Greece, long before torches were lit or hymns began, there was preparation. Quiet, steady, deliberate. For most people, festivals did not arrive suddenly. They unfolded slowly, like dawn spreading across a pale horizon. Imagine yourself in a small attic village. The sun has just begun to lift above the low hills, spilling gold over tiled rooftops. The air carries the mild scent of olive oil and grain dust. Somewhere, a woman kneels beside a clay basin, washing the last of the winter's soot from her linen garments. The day before the festival is one of both anticipation and gentle fatigue, an endless list of small tasks to be done before the sacred day begins. Men walk to the fields, not to work, but to tidy what will soon rest idle. Tools are cleaned and stored in wooden sheds, oxen brushed and watered. The animals seem to sense something different in the air, a pause in the usual rhythm. The women remain near the hearths, grinding barley, shaping bread, soaking herbs. Some hum quietly as they work, repeating melodies that their mothers sang and their grandmothers before them. These preparations are not hurried. Time in the ancient world moved differently, stretched across the day like warm honey. Even work carried a rhythm that soothed rather than strained. A household might spend hours polishing the family's small altar stone or arranging dried flowers from last year's harvest. Children dart in and out of the doorways, carrying baskets of figs, giggling, occasionally scolded for tasting too many. Festivals were sacred, yes, but they were also deeply human. They reminded people of the fragile thread connecting their work to the favor of the gods. A missed ritual or forgotten offering could bring unease, not from fear alone, but from the feeling of imbalance. Life depended on harmony, with the seasons, the community, the divine. As the day wears on, you might hear faint music rising from the neighboring farms, a shepherd's flute practicing the tune that will accompany the procession tomorrow. The sound drifts over the fields like a bird's slow glide, fading and returning, comforting in its repetition. In Athens and larger towns, preparations took on a different character. Markets grew crowded, the air thick with conversation. Merchants spread fabrics dyed in muted shades of ochre and indigo. Potters offered new cups, jugs, and figurines for votive offerings. In narrow streets, artisans adjusted garlands of ivy and laurel, hanging them above shop doors. Even in the bustle, there was a kind of reverent calm, as if everyone moved according to some invisible pulse shared by the whole city. The priests and priestesses, meanwhile, performed quiet rituals of cleansing. Before the public ceremonies, they purified themselves in cold water, standing beneath marble fountains or in secluded courtyards. Their garments, often woven months in advance, were inspected for loose threads or discoloration. Every detail mattered, not for vanity, but for precision, for devotion. Night settled slowly over the landscape. Oil lamps flickered in doorways, and families gathered to eat. The meal was simple: bread, olives, a handful of lentils, perhaps wine if the season allowed. Conversation drifted toward what tomorrow would bring, which neighbors would attend, whether the weather would hold, which hymns would be sung first. As you listen, picture that world without noise beyond the soft murmur of voices and the occasional bark of a distant dog. The stars above are cold and brilliant, the same stars that once guided sailors and storytellers. There is no rush, no bright glow of modern distraction, only the gentle certainty that the next day would belong to the gods. And so, one by one, lamps were extinguished. The village sank into stillness. The last ember in the hearth glowed faintly red. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called across the valley. The people slept, their dreams already half-shaped by anticipation. The smell of torches, the sound of drums, the warmth of gathering. Tomorrow would be the festival. But tonight, peace held the land like a lullaby. In that ancient calm, you might find something familiar, an echo of your own quiet routines, your own preparations for rest. The same wish to set things in order before stepping into something sacred, something unknown. So breathe deeply as they once did. Feel the rhythm of their days. The slow, patient heartbeat of a world long vanished, but never truly gone. Morning arrives softly over the Greek countryside, pale and shimmering. The festival day begins not with alarm or command, but with a natural unfolding. Light creeping through narrow windows, roosters calling from the hillsides, the quiet shuffle of sandals on stone. The air carries a freshness born of dew and expectation. Imagine yourself stepping outside a modest clay house. The sky above is pale gold, the kind of color that promises warmth without yet delivering it. Across the village, small fires are rekindled. The scent of smoke mingles with bread baking and olive oil warming in shallow pans. It is the morning of celebration, a day when ordinary life pauses and the sacred steps forward. The first task is cleansing. Men and women wash their hands and faces in cool water, a symbolic gesture that renews body and spirit alike. Children, still drowsy, are dressed in their cleanest linen. Their laughter echoes faintly between stone walls, gentle but bright. Even the animals seem aware of the day's significance. Oxen low softly in their pens, goats stand watchful near the fence. Soon, the procession gathers. At first, it is small, neighbors joining one by one, carrying offerings wrapped in cloth or nestled in woven baskets. There are garlands of flowers, small cakes of honey, bowls of grain, and tiny clay figures molded to honor a deity. The participants speak little. Conversation is replaced by the rhythm of footsteps and the soft tapping of walking sticks. In Athens, such processions could stretch for miles. Citizens walk side by side with slaves, farmers with philosophers. The festival was the great equalizer, at least for a day. Along the route, statues were adorned with ribbons, and altars were freshly whitewashed. The road leading toward the temple shimmered faintly with the dust of countless feet. The music began faintly, flutes and lyres, the sound delicate but insistent. A steady beat from a hand drum joined in, guiding the pace. The crowd's movement became a kind of breathing, a collective heartbeat that pulsed toward the sanctuary. Along the way, women scattered petals, and children waved small branches dipped in oil. The air filled with mingled scents, burnt resin, sweet myrtle, fresh wool. At the front of the procession walked the priestess or priest, solemn yet serene. Their garments were simple but bright, often white with threads of gold or blue. They carried no weapon, no scepter, only a symbol of the god or goddess being honored that day. Sometimes it was a small statue, sometimes a branch of laurel, sometimes merely a bowl of sacred water. Behind them came musicians, dancers, and the throngs of worshippers. The destination was often the temple's outer courtyard, where all could gather. There, beneath the marble columns, a hush would fall. The people would wait as the priest or priestess offered the first prayer. The words, spoken in ancient cadence, asked for peace, for good harvest, for health of the people and strength of the city. The crowd listened not for meaning, but for rhythm, the soft rise and fall of familiar phrases that bound them to generations past. Then came the offerings. Bread, fruits, and small animals were brought forward. The act was both sacred and practical. Part of the offering would later become a shared meal. The smoke of burnt incense rose into the air, curling upward like a fragile bridge between the mortal and the divine. Some closed their eyes and breathed deeply, as if to inhale a piece of that connection. The children grew restless, tugging at tunics, chasing each other quietly among the crowd. An old man told a story of how, in his youth, the gods once sent a sign, a flock of doves descending upon the altar just as the first hymn was sung. His voice was soft, his words measured. The younger ones listened, half believing, half dreaming. Around midday, the sun reached its height, glinting off bronze and marble. The heat shimmered gently, but no one complained. To be present at the festival was itself a blessing. Merchants sold cool water flavored with mint, and elders rested in the shade of olive trees. Musicians played on, their tunes weaving between laughter and prayer, between reverence and relief. Every detail of the day carried meaning. The order of the procession, the garments worn, even the way each person carried themselves. All were small threads in a vast tapestry of devotion. Though centuries have passed, traces of these rituals still echo in how people mark time, how they celebrate, how they seek something larger than themselves. As the afternoon drew near, the energy of the morning began to soften. Offerings had been given, prayers spoken, songs sung. What remained was a quiet satisfaction, a sense that the world, for a moment, was in harmony. The procession had ended, but its rhythm lingered, a steady pulse that would carry through the evening. You can almost feel it, the warmth of the stones beneath bare feet, the hum of voices fading as the crowd disperses, the flicker of incense curling against the blue sky. A day once ordinary, now sanctified by memory. And in that gentle hum of devotion, time slows again. The people drift homeward, baskets empty, hearts light, the divine presence fading but not gone. The gods, perhaps, are pleased. The afternoon wanes. Shadows stretch long across the earth, and the sound of music softens to a slow, familiar rhythm. The air is warm, fragrant with the mingled scent of oil, wine, and freshly baked bread. It is the hour when solemn prayer gives way to gentle joy, the feast, the heart of every ancient festival. Imagine the village square or temple courtyard transformed. Simple wooden tables are brought forward, rough-hewn and worn smooth by years of use. Clay cups are filled, jugs pass from hand to hand. The people gather not as separate ranks of rich and poor, but as one, neighbors, friends, and families bound by the same ritual purpose. The gods have been honored, the sacrifices offered. Now the celebration belongs to the living. The first sounds are laughter, soft at first, then fuller. The solemn quiet of morning loosens into conversation. Someone strums a lyre, its notes like water rippling over stone. A shepherd's flute joins in, weaving a melody that drifts across the square. No single musician leads, and no one listens too intently. The music is there to fill the air, to accompany the steady rhythm of voices, like the hum of bees in summer. Food is simple but abundant. Loaves of barley bread are broken and shared, dipped in olive oil fragrant with herbs. Bowls of figs and olives pass between hands. There is cheese, soft, crumbly, faintly sharp, and roasted fish seasoned with salt. Occasionally, someone pours a little wine into the earth, a final token for the gods who, though unseen, are never far away. Children dance first, as they always do. Their steps are clumsy but joyous, arms swinging wide as laughter rises. The elders watch, smiling faintly, remembering their own younger days. Soon, others join, men and women, priests and artisans, even weary travelers drawn in by the scent and song. The dances are not performed, but lived, circles turning slowly, feet tapping lightly, robes swaying in gentle rhythm. The earth beneath seems to pulse with the same slow heartbeat that guided the morning's procession. As dusk deepens, torches are lit. Their glow flickers against the white stone walls and the polished bronze of offering bowls. The air feels different now, softer, touched by night. Overhead, the first stars appear, scattered like distant embers. The music slows, the rhythm deepens. A singer's voice rises low, unhurried, carrying words older than memory. It tells of a goddess's kindness, a harvest spared from drought, a city protected from storm. In that twilight, the line between mortal and divine blurs. The festival is both worship and rest, both remembrance and renewal. Even those who no longer believe in the old gods feel the quiet comfort of belonging to a land, to a people, to time itself. Imagine the scene more closely. A woman refilling a neighbor's cup, a young man plucking a lyre beneath a fig tree, a priestess seated near the altar, her face calm in the torchlight. Children curl against their mother's sides, half asleep, lulled by music and murmurs. Dogs lie near the edges of the square, tails flicking lazily. The entire village hums with the rhythm of peace. There are moments of silence too, soft and companionable. The fire crackles. Someone tells a story, his voice slow and melodic. A tale of how Athena once disguised herself as a farmer's daughter to teach humility, or how Dionysus wandered the vineyards, blessing and cursing in equal measure. The listeners nod, not because they believe every word, but because the story itself feels ancient and right. By now, the moon has risen. Its silver light mingles with the orange glow of the torches, casting soft shadows across faces and walls. The air cools, carrying with it the faint scent of the sea. The feast lingers, but the tone has changed. No longer jubilant, but contented, almost meditative. Some begin to drift away quietly, slipping home through narrow lanes. Others remain, sitting together in the dimming square, sharing the last of the bread. The music grows sparse, a single flute or voice tracing the night like smoke. Conversations fade into murmurs. The world feels suspended, poised between waking and sleep. And somewhere within that stillness lies the essence of the Greek festival. Not the grandeur of marble temples or the heroism of myth, but this quiet communion. 1,000 hands that work the soil now rest. 1,000 voices usually lost in labor, rise together for one brief evening. The gods may not answer, but perhaps they listen. When the final torch is extinguished, darkness returns, not as emptiness, but as rest. The stars glimmer like old memories. The feast is over, yet its peace lingers in the heart, the kind that endures long after songs have faded. As you breathe with them, feel that same rhythm, the slow unwinding of a long day, the satisfaction of work done and peace earned. The feast ends, but the calm remains, drifting quietly into the night. As the night fades and dawn begins to stir, another story awakens, quieter, older, hidden between the folds of centuries. It is not a tale of heroes or kings, but of a woman whose life was bound to ritual and devotion. A figure once known simply as Lysandra, though the name might have shifted through time. Her memory survives not in monuments or epics, but in the faint traces of clay tablets and worn inscriptions, small whispers of a life devoted to the gods of morning light. Imagine her world. The year is somewhere in the 5th century before the Common Era. The air of early Attica carries the faint scent of salt and wild thyme. The city is small yet watchful, its temples bright against the dark hills. The first rays of the sun strike the marble of a modest sanctuary dedicated to Eos, the goddess of dawn. This is where Lysandra walks each day, her steps soft against the worn stone path. Her duties are not grand, yet they define her existence. Before the first light touches the sky, she tends to the altar, clearing yesterday's ashes, arranging sprigs of laurel, refilling the vessel with clean water. She moves in silence, guided by rhythm rather than command. Her garments are simple, linen dyed pale with the residue of saffron, and around her neck hangs a small bronze charm, shaped like a rising sun. For many, she is invisible. The marketplace hums nearby, merchants setting up stalls, fishermen unloading their morning catch, and the priestess passes quietly through it all. Yet in her stillness lies authority. She is not a ruler, not a mother, but a guardian of sacred repetition. Her prayers mark the turning of days. Her rituals remind the people that even light must be welcomed, not assumed. Historians might call her insignificant, a minor attendant of a lesser deity. But consider how her life must have felt from within. Each morning, the same motions, the same hymn, the same rising light spilling over the horizon. It might seem monotonous, but in that constancy there was peace. In her quiet gestures, the chaos of the world was momentarily stilled. Occasionally, others would join her, a young acolyte, perhaps, or travelers seeking favor from the goddess. Lysandra would guide them gently, her voice low and melodic. She would show them how to hold the offering bowl, how to place the bread upon the altar, how to bow before the light. She did not demand belief. She only asked for attention, for stillness. Records suggest that once each year at the festival of Eos, she would lead a small procession before sunrise. Few attended, only those who cherished the dawn for its quiet rather than its color. They walked in silence, their torches dimming as the first rays crept over the horizon. Lysandra would raise her hands, not to command the light, but to greet it. The sun returns, she might have whispered, and so does life. The inscription found near her temple, fragmented, nearly erased, bears a simple phrase. She opened the gate for the light. Scholars debate its meaning, but perhaps it was more than metaphor. Perhaps she saw herself as the human counterpart to the goddess she served. Her daily service a form of opening, a quiet invitation for the day to begin again. Her life was modest, her world small. Yet there is something deeply human in her devotion, something familiar even now. To rise before dawn, to tend to a duty known only to oneself, to repeat the same task until the repetition becomes a kind of prayer. These are acts that transcend time. As she grew older, her pace slowed, but she continued her rituals. The villagers began to call her Mother of the Morning, though she had no children of her own. They left small offerings at her door, grains, oil, a flower or two. She accepted them with the same calm grace that had defined her youth. No grand monument marked her passing. Perhaps a handful of mourners stood at the temple steps, the air cool with early morning mist. The dawn came, as it always had, unbothered by human grief. Yet in that light, something lingered, the rhythm of her days, the echo of her footsteps, the whisper of her mourning hymn carried by the wind. Over time, her name faded, but her presence endured in practice. For centuries after, priestesses of other dawn shrines followed the same order of rituals, cleansing, offering, greeting the light, never knowing whose footsteps they echoed. Even now, if you find yourself awake before sunrise, you might feel a trace of her presence. The stillness before the first birds stir, the faint blush of light over the horizon. It is the same world she once knew. And though her temple lies in ruin, her quiet devotion lingers in the rhythm of dawn itself. In the hush of that first light, the boundaries blur between priestess and sky, between ancient and present. The world exhales. The day begins. The rituals that shaped Lysandra's days were part of a larger web of sacred customs, acts that once connected every home, every temple, and every festival to the quiet rhythm of the divine. These were the rituals of light, offerings made not to demand favor, but to maintain balance. In the ancient Greek world, the rising and setting of the sun were not simply natural events. They were dialogues between mortals and gods. Imagine the dawn on a festival morning. The world is hushed, the first light pale and fragile. Before words are spoken, the priestess steps forward, her arms cradling a bowl carved from simple stone. Inside it, a mixture of barley grains and tiny fragments of dried honey gleam faintly in the dim glow of torches. She pauses before the altar, listening to the silence. Then, with a motion as gentle as breath, she scatters the grains into the air. They fall softly, glimmering like dust caught in early sunlight. The act seems simple, almost meaningless to modern eyes. But to those who watched, it carried deep weight. The scattering of grain symbolized release, the letting go of the old to make space for the new. Each grain represented a fragment of life, effort, hope, and the unseen labor of the year gone by. To cast it into the air was to surrender, trusting that the gods would return it as sustenance, as renewal. After the offering, a lamp was lit. Not any lamp, but a small vessel of clay, its flame kindled from the sacred fire kept within the temple walls. The oil was pure, pressed from the first olives of the season. The priestess would dip a slender wick into the flame, then carry the light outward, sharing it among the gathered worshippers. Each person would light their own lamp, and soon the temple courtyard shimmered with dozens of small, flickering lights, each one a fragment of dawn, a personal prayer made visible. The symbolism extended further than light. Every item used in the ritual spoke a language of meaning. The laurel leaves placed upon the altar represented renewal, immortality, and the cleansing power of fire. The honey cakes, baked into delicate spirals, echoed the sun's circular path through the sky. Even the vessels themselves, the cups, bowls, and amphorae, were shaped with deliberate care, their forms guided by centuries of inherited design. Nothing was accidental. Every gesture was layered with intention. Among the most sacred moments came when water was poured from a height onto the earth below. The sound was soft, rhythmic. The Greeks called it cho, the libation, the act of giving back. As the water soaked into the soil, it carried with it silent gratitude, a recognition of the shared exchange between humans and the world that nourished them. Lysandra, or those like her, would often close their eyes during this act, her lips moving in quiet recitation. As the light returns, so may our hearts be made pure. In some temples, colored powders were scattered alongside the grain. Ochre, crushed shells, fragments of saffron. These hues caught the morning light, shimmering briefly before being swept away by the breeze. To those watching, it might have felt like the dawn itself had been painted by human hands. The rituals were repeated daily, monthly, yearly, Some took only minutes, others lasted hours, synchronized with the turning of celestial cycles. But what made them powerful was not the grandeur. It was the repetition, the constancy. The Greeks understood that peace came not through spectacle, but through rhythm, through the faithful return to the same simple actions. Archaeologists have unearthed remnants of these practices, small offering pits lined with ash and fragments of pottery, faint traces of soot where lamps once burned. On some shards, faint inscriptions survive, short invocations like "to the dawn" or "for the sun's mercy." These pieces, though mute, hum with the quiet energy of devotion, the persistence of meaning long after memory has faded. For Lysandra and her kind, such rituals were not performance, but meditation. Each gesture connected her to something infinite. The same light that touched her eyes touched those of her ancestors and would one day touch those not yet born. The offerings reminded her that life was cyclical, that loss and renewal were bound together like day and night. In the calm after each ceremony, when the last flame flickered out and the air grew still, she would linger for a moment. The scent of oil and ash would cling to her garments, the cool marble beneath her feet grounding her in silence. In that pause, she might look eastward, where the light strengthened, and whisper a final, private prayer, not for miracles or glory, but for balance, for the gentle continuation of all things. The rituals of light were small, but their endurance reveals something universal, the human desire to make meaning from repetition, to find comfort in the act of renewal. Even now, when we light a candle, when we greet the morning, when we pause to breathe and begin again, perhaps a faint echo of those ancient gestures stirs within us. The sun rises as it did for her, and we, like the priestess of dawn, begin once more. As centuries passed, the soft glow of those morning rituals began to fade from the Greek world. The festivals of dawn, once so essential to the rhythm of life, grew quieter, first in the cities, then in the countryside. The old gods, who had watched from marble temples and mountain peaks, seemed to retreat slowly into memory. Yet for a long time, the rituals persisted, carried by those who still believed that to greet the sun was to honor something eternal. Imagine, once more, the same temple courtyard, its stones worn smooth by countless feet. The air is cooler now, the light thinner. The world has changed. Traders from distant lands pass through the ports, bringing new ideas, new faiths, new rhythms of devotion. But here, in this small sanctuary at the edge of the city, an aging priestess still wakes before dawn. Her name is not recorded, though some whisper she was the last of her line, the final keeper of the rites of light. She rises in silence, her hands steady though marked by time. Around her, the temple is crumbling. Cracks run through the marble floor. Ivy curls along the once white walls. Birds nest where torches once burned. The air smells of dust and salt, and somewhere beyond the hill, the first call of a shepherd echoes faintly. Still, she moves through the same gestures that her ancestors once performed. She gathers the grain. She lights the lamp. She raises her eyes toward the horizon, where a thin band of gold trembles above the sea. The ritual, unchanged, seems to slow the passage of time. For a moment, the centuries compress, the ancient and the fading meet in one soft breath. It is said that, in her final years, the priestess would perform the dawn ritual not for a crowd, but alone. No offerings were left by villagers. No musicians came to play. The city had turned its gaze elsewhere, to new temples, to new gods, to new ways of naming the divine. Yet she remained. Perhaps she felt that to let the flame die would unbalance the world in some quiet, unseen way. When the rains came, she would shield the sacred lamp beneath her cloak, carrying its fragile flame back to her quarters. And when the storms passed, she would relight the fire in the open air, whispering softly, "The light endures." It was less a declaration than a prayer, spoken more to the wind than to the heavens. Over time, even her footsteps grew faint. The temple fell silent. We do not know what became of her. Perhaps one morning, she simply did not rise, and the dawn passed without its guardian. The sacred lamp, once tended by countless hands, flickered out. And yet, light does not truly vanish. It travels, reflects, refracts. The warmth of her ritual lingered, unseen, carried forward in small ways, perhaps in the lighting of a candle before dawn, or in the whispered prayer of a sailor setting out to sea. Centuries later, when archaeologists uncovered the ruins of that sanctuary, they found fragments that spoke of her devotion. A cracked oil lamp, its handle worn smooth, a handful of blackened barley grains sealed in a clay bowl, faint traces of pigment on a stone relief depicting the rising sun. These remnants, though silent, seem to hum with memory. In a way, the fading of her faith mirrors a universal truth. Every age believes its customs will endure forever, yet time softens even the most steadfast traditions. The Greeks themselves inherited their rituals from older civilizations. The Minoans, the Mycenaeans, those who worshipped the dawn long before Zeus or Apollo had names. Each generation reshaped belief to match the rhythm of its life. What survives is not the form, but the feeling, the yearning for light, the reverence for renewal, the comfort of repetition. So when the last dawn priestess stood before the sea and watched the sun ascend for the final time, she was not merely closing a chapter. She was passing a torch that would be rekindled again and again in countless forms. In church bells at morning, in the lighting of Sabbath candles, in the simple human act of greeting the day. The rituals changed, but the need they answered remained the same. If you listen closely to the hush before sunrise, to the first stirrings of light across the land, you might still sense what she once felt. The soft vibration of the world awakening, the brief and perfect stillness before movement returns. It is a reminder that light endures not because of temples or names, but because it is part of the world itself. The ancient Greeks believed that every dawn was a promise renewed, a small, quiet assurance that after darkness, there would always be light. And in that faith, fragile yet enduring, we find a reflection of our own longing, to trust that each ending is followed by a beginning, that no ritual, however forgotten, truly disappears. So the dawn rises still. The light spills gently over the ruins, over olive groves and distant seas. The flame that once burned in marble halls now glows quietly in our homes, in our hands, in the stories we tell. And perhaps, as you listen to this, the same ancient warmth brushes against your thoughts, guiding you softly toward rest. The light endures, and so do we. As day surrendered to night, and the golden glow of Apollo faded from the marble horizons, another kind of worship began, one that was softer, more secret, and deeply ancient. Long before the Olympian gods claimed their thrones, the Greeks had revered the quiet majesty of the night. They called her Nyx, the goddess of darkness and stars. To her belonged the moments between sunset and dawn, when the world turned inward and the boundaries between dream and waking seemed to dissolve. The festival of Nyx, though rarely mentioned in surviving texts, once shimmered through the Greek calendar like a faint constellation, visible only when the right conditions allowed. It was said to take place once each year, when the nights grew long and the stars burned low on the horizon. Unlike the public spectacles of Dionysus or Athena, this festival was intimate, almost hidden. No crowds gathered in city squares. No trumpets blared. No torches roared. Instead, it unfolded in the hush of shadow, where words softened and silence spoke. Imagine yourself on a hillside near an ancient polis, perhaps Thebes or Ephesus, long after sunset. The fields are silvered with moonlight, and the air carries the faint fragrance of time and warm dust. A gentle breeze drifts through olive trees, their leaves whispering like quiet waves. In the distance, the outline of a small temple stands against the sky, its roof open to the stars. Those who came to honor Nyx would arrive without fanfare, cloaked and barefoot, each carrying a small oil lamp covered with a dark cloth to dim its glow. They would gather at the edge of the sanctuary, speaking in low voices. It was not a festival of sound, but of stillness. To disturb the night was to dishonor it. The ceremony began not with fire, but with darkness itself. The priests and priestesses, known as Nictaries or keepers of the night, would slowly extinguish the few remaining torches at the temple entrance. One by one, the lights dimmed until the night became complete. For a moment, nothing could be seen but the stars. Then, softly, a low hum began, wordless, like a single breath shared among many. It rose and fell gently, a rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of the earth. This sound, they believe, called to Nyx, awakening her presence in the sky. It was not worship as we know it, but communion, an offering of calm attention. The participants sat in quiet circles, their faces lit only by the reflection of starlight. Some would trace small symbols in the dust, spirals, crescents, eyes, each marking a personal wish or remembrance. The night unfolded slowly, its silence deep and enveloping, as if the stars themselves were listening. Midway through the ceremony, a single lamp would be uncovered at the temple's center. Its flame, blue and delicate, represented the first light of creation, the spark from which Nyx herself was born. The priest would recite verses that have long since vanished from written memory, though a fragment survives in an inscription found near Corinth. O mother of shadow and silence, cradle of stars, let our hearts be still, that we may hear the sky breathe. The participants were invited to close their eyes and breathe with the night, to let their thoughts drift unhurried, to feel the weight of time melt away. It was a ritual not of doing, but of being, a reminder that the world's quiet moments hold as much sacredness as its grandest celebrations. As the hours passed, the temple filled with a kind of luminous peace. The night no longer seemed empty, but alive, woven with the soft murmurs of wind and distant waves, with the occasional call of an owl echoing through the dark. At the festival's peak, the high priestess would stand and lift her hands toward the stars. She would whisper a single phrase, almost too faint to hear, "The night remembers." No one knows exactly what offerings were made to Nyx. Some say bowls of milk and poppy seeds were left upon the altar. Others claim that only silence was required. But what all sources agree upon is that the festival ended not with music or wine, but with rest. Each participant would lie upon the ground, their cloaks drawn over them, and fall asleep beneath the open sky. To sleep in Nyx's presence was to be blessed, to dream in the company of the goddess of night herself. And so, the hillside would fall still. Dozens of quiet forms, breathing in rhythm with the night, while the stars continued their slow, eternal dance above. It was not spectacle, but surrender, a gentle reminder that peace comes not from striving, but from stillness. The festival of Nyx did not survive the centuries. As new gods rose and new philosophies took hold, her name slipped into the realm of myth. Yet even now, when we gaze at the night sky in silence, when we find calm in the quiet hours, something of that forgotten festival stirs within us. The night remembers, still. As the memory of Nyx's festival drifted through the centuries, her presence lingered quietly across the Greek world. Though her name faded from the public rituals of the city, whispers of her worship remained in smaller, more personal spaces. The Greeks were not strangers to the night. It was in darkness that their greatest thinkers found inspiration. Their poets crafted hymns, and their sailors charted their courses by the slow, unwavering patterns of stars. The temples of night, though few in number, were among the most hauntingly beautiful sanctuaries of the ancient world. They were not the grand marble structures dedicated to Zeus or Athena. Instead, they were humble, often built on hillsides or near caves, far from the bustle of cities. Their design followed a simple rule: openness to the sky. Many lacked roofs entirely, allowing the constellations to be seen directly above the altar. In these spaces, the boundary between heaven and earth seemed to blur, and the night air itself became a participant in the ritual. Imagine standing within one of these sanctuaries at twilight. The stones beneath your feet are cool, smooth from centuries of touch. The walls, low and uneven, are half covered with ivy and lichen. At the center lies a circular altar, its surface etched with symbols of the moon, stars, and spiral patterns representing time. Around it, the ground is scattered with the faint remnants of offerings, fragments of pottery, beads of glass, and the charred remains of oil lamps long extinguished. Here, the faithful gathered not to petition the gods, but to observe. They watched the slow unfolding of the night, tracing constellations that told stories older than writing itself. The Greeks saw the heavens as a vast, living text, one that spoke through motion rather than words. The temple, in its simplicity, became an observatory of both nature and spirit. Inscriptions discovered near Mount Parnassus speak of a group called the Astrophoroi, or Star-Bearers. They were devotees of Nyx and her children, the gods of dreams, destiny, and sleep. These worshippers would meet once each lunar cycle. Their ceremonies began when the first star appeared in the twilight sky. Each participant carried a polished stone, engraved with a small symbol, a crescent, a spiral, or the figure of an eye. As the stars emerged, they would lift their stones to catch the faint glimmer of starlight, believing that the night itself infused the stones with quiet power. These stones, later buried in sacred pits, were said to preserve dreams. The Greeks believed that dreams were not mere fragments of the mind, but messages carried through the night by divine intermediaries. By placing their dream stones in the earth, the worshippers were returning those messages to the goddess who governed them. In this gentle exchange between sleep and waking, they sought understanding and peace. The atmosphere of these temples was unlike any other. There was no fire roaring, no incense thickening the air. The scent was faint, olive oil, cool stone, the subtle fragrance of night-blooming flowers. The only illumination came from the moon and the stars, whose pale light painted the sanctuary in shades of silver and shadow. When the wind moved, it stirred the leaves and the robes of the worshippers, creating a quiet rustle that blended seamlessly with the night's own song. Sometimes the priest would recite verses from the Orphic hymns, those ancient songs that bridged myth and philosophy. One hymn to Nyx begins, "O night, O blessed mother of the gods, you wrap the world in your silent embrace, and bring rest to all weary things." The words were not shouted, but murmured, passed softly from voice to voice, until they dissolved into the air. The temple became a vessel for stillness, a place where even thought slowed, and time itself seemed to pause. There is evidence that these nocturnal sanctuaries were also used for celestial observation. Archaeologists have found small niches aligned with particular constellations, Orion, Lyra, the Pleiades. When the stars reached their appointed positions, light would fall upon specific carvings or symbols, creating moments of alignment that the ancients read as omens. The worship of Nyx, then, was not merely spiritual. It was observational, a quiet form of astronomy wrapped in reverence. These temples remind us that the Greeks did not separate science from the sacred. To watch the stars was both study and prayer. The slow turning of the heavens offered assurance that even in an unpredictable world, there was order, an unchanging rhythm beneath all things. It was this rhythm, this gentle constancy, that lulled them into peace. As dawn approached, the worshippers would depart in silence, leaving no trace but the faint imprint of their feet in the dust. The sanctuary would remain open, the altar cool and waiting, the night's secrets absorbed once more into the stones. Today, only fragments of those temples survive. A foundation here, a carved altar there, yet the feeling endures. To stand beneath the same sky, to breathe the same night air, is to share, however faintly, in that ancient reverence. The stars still wheel above us, unchanged. The night, patient and eternal, still listens. And somewhere, in the vast stillness between dusk and dawn, the echo of those long-forgotten prayers continues to hum, a quiet thread of continuity, weaving the modern world to the ancient and the waking mind to sleep. In the hush of ancient Greek nights, when the air grew still and even the sea seemed to pause its breathing, dreams were not mere illusions of the mind. They were seen as bridges to the divine. The people who worshipped Nyx, the goddess of night, believed that within sleep lay a sacred language, one that could not be spoken or written, but only felt. The Greeks called this hidden dialogue oneiroi, the dream messengers. To them, every dream carried a meaning, a thread connecting the mortal and immortal realms. While the day belonged to reason and discourse, the night belonged to mystery and reflection. And it was within that deep stillness that the gods whispered truths too delicate for daylight. Imagine an Athenian household 2,500 years ago. The lamps are dimmed, the courtyard cloaked in moonlight. A small bronze brazier smolders softly, filling the air with the faint scent of cedar smoke. The family sleeps upon low couches, wrapped in woven blankets, while beyond the walls, the city murmurs with distant waves and the occasional bark of a dog. In that space between waking and dream, the boundaries blur. The stone walls feel thinner, the air thicker with meaning. For many, this nightly passage into sleep was considered a sacred journey. Before resting, some would pour a small libation of water or milk beside their bed, murmuring a simple prayer to Nyx or her son, Hypnos, the god of sleep. May my dreams be gentle and my heart open to the signs of the night. Others place small symbols beneath their pillows, a feather, a polished stone, or a sprig of lavender, objects believed to invite peaceful visions. Temples devoted to sleep and dream interpretation existed across the Greek world, most famously at Epidaurus, the sanctuary of Asclepius, where pilgrims came not just to heal the body, but to receive guidance through dreams. Within those sacred enclosures, known as abaton, visitors slept upon straw mats and awaited divine messages that arrived in the silent hours. Priests trained in the art of interpretation would listen carefully as each pilgrim recounted their visions at dawn. Every detail mattered. The color of a bird's feather, the direction of a breeze, the sound of a distant lyre. All were fragments of meaning, threads to be woven into understanding. But for the followers of Nyx, dreams were not only for prophecy, they were for peace. To dream was to participate in the eternal cycle of renewal, a nightly rehearsal of death and rebirth. As the waking world dissolved, the soul wandered freely through landscapes of memory and imagination, then returned at dawn, cleansed and quiet. Some writings from late antiquity speak of secret nocturnal gatherings, small groups who sought to master lucid dreaming, to become aware within their sleep. They believed that by doing so, they could approach the gods more directly, walking through the dream world as conscious guests. The process required calmness, fasting, and long periods of meditation. Those who achieved it described sensations of floating above their own bodies, of hearing soft music with no source, of drifting through starlit halls where no sound was sharp, and every surface glowed faintly as if lit from within. The language of dreams, they said, was not one of words, but of symbols, spirals, doors, rivers, wings. Each symbol carried multiple layers of meaning, changing depending on who dreamt it. The same image could comfort one person and warn another. To understand dreams was not to decode them like puzzles, but to sit with them quietly and let them unfold their meaning with time. Silence was central to this understanding. The Greeks revered silence not as emptiness, but as the vessel of the divine. To keep silent after a dream was to let its power settle, like dust drifting to rest after movement. Many dreamers refrained from speaking upon waking, holding their visions in stillness for a moment before dawn broke the spell. This practice, simple yet profound, blurred the line between meditation and worship. In the temples of Nyx, silence was treated as an offering equal to gold. To remain wordless in the presence of the goddess was to honor her domain. Some altars bore inscriptions that read, "Let none speak, for the night listens." Even in their architecture, these sanctuaries echoed stillness, sound absorbed by walls of clay, footsteps muffled by sand. The night became both teacher and companion. It is easy to imagine the quiet comfort this brought. In a world of uncertainty, wars, storms, famine, sleep offered a refuge untouched by human conflict. The faith that something sacred awaited beyond the threshold of consciousness gave the Greeks solace, just as it might offer you, now, a gentle path toward rest. For the ancient dreamers, the night was not an absence of light, but a different kind of illumination, one that glowed inward rather than outward. They trusted that within the soft folds of darkness, wisdom could be found and peace restored. So, as the world around you stills, imagine yourself lying beneath the same endless sky the Greeks once knew. The stars wheel slowly above, patient and timeless. The air hums faintly with memory. You close your eyes, and perhaps, somewhere deep within the silence, the goddess of night leans close, whispering softly in a language only your dreams can understand. When dawn returned to Greece and the shadows withdrew into the folds of stone and olive groves, life awakened to ritual and appetite. Food, for the ancients, was never just sustenance. It was the language of community, of hierarchy, of gratitude to the gods. Every meal, from the humblest hearth to the marble halls of Athens' elite, told a story about who one was and what one believed. Among the upper classes, the symposium, literally drinking together, stood as the crown of social gatherings. These were not mere dinners. They were theatrical displays of wealth, intellect, and refinement. Reclining on carved couches called clinai, men draped in light tunics leaned upon embroidered cushions while slaves poured wine from bronze craters, mixing it carefully with water. Drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric, a mark of recklessness and poor breeding. Everything had to be balanced, measured, harmonious, like music or mathematics. The evening began with a ritual libation, a few drops of wine poured to honor the gods, especially Dionysus, patron of ecstasy and revelry. Only then did the true feast begin. Platters of roasted fish, olives glistening with oil, cheeses soft as clouds, figs, honeyed pastries, and fragrant herbs filled the air with sweetness and salt. Musicians played soft notes on the aulos, a double-piped flute that wove between conversation and laughter like a thread of smoke. But behind the elegance, these feasts carried deeper meanings. The symposium was a reflection of order, a miniature of the cosmos itself. The guests represented harmony among men. The host symbolized moderation, and the servants embodied duty. The Greeks saw in dining an art of balance, indulgence paired with restraint, joy paired with wisdom. The topics of conversation were as carefully chosen as the dishes themselves. Philosophers debated virtue and beauty. Poets recited verses by Hesiod and Sappho. Others played intellectual games, tossing riddles or cups of wine in playful contests of wit known as katabos. Each gesture, each word, added to the evening's rhythm, flowing like a symphony of thought and pleasure. Yet outside the polished halls of the elite, another kind of feast was taking place, a quieter, earthier, and perhaps more human celebration. In small village homes, families gathered around simple clay hearths, bread baked from barley, lentil stew simmered with onions and herbs, olives cracked between teeth, and the laughter of children formed a music no less sacred than that of the symposium. For the common people, food was deeply tied to the land. Every olive, every grain was the result of toil beneath the sun. When harvest came, villagers gave thanks not through grand speeches, but through dance and song. Offerings of fruit and honey were left on small household altars for Demeter, goddess of the earth's bounty. Even a modest loaf of bread, warm and fragrant, was seen as proof of divine generosity. At festivals, the lines between rich and poor blurred slightly, if only for a day. During the Panathenaic or Dionysian festivals, the streets of Athens overflowed with processions, music, and shared food. The communal meal, known as syssitia, allowed citizens to eat together regardless of rank, honoring unity before the gods. Great cauldrons bubbled with barley broth and roasted meat. Laughter echoed through marble courtyards as torches flickered against the night sky. In these moments, Greece seemed to rediscover its own soul. The belief that joy was a shared flame, not a possession. To eat together was to reaffirm the threads that bound society. Even the philosophers, who preached moderation, knew that to deny pleasure entirely was to deny the gods who gifted it. As Aristotle once said, to live well is to live together. Yet beneath the festivity lay subtle tensions. The luxurious banquets of the wealthy drew both admiration and quiet resentment. Plato himself often warned against excess, comparing the body of a glutton to a city ruled by chaos. In contrast, the Stoics saw in simple meals a form of discipline, a way to remind oneself that happiness lay not in abundance, but in gratitude. Still, food united what philosophy divided. Whether reclining upon ivory couches or sitting cross-legged on cool earth, Greeks shared one belief, that the act of eating was sacred. Each meal was a bridge between gods and mortals, a renewal of the bond between creation and creature. The bread represented Demeter's grace, the wine Dionysus's spirit, the olive Athena's wisdom. In the silence that followed every feast, after the music faded and lamps dimmed, came a moment of reflection. The elite and the humble alike would look toward the sky, perhaps catching the glimmer of a star reflected in the surface of a wine cup. In that reflection lived a quiet truth, that life's beauty, whether clothed in silk or linen, was fleeting and therefore precious. The Greeks cherished not the abundance itself, but the ritual, the way the senses intertwined with gratitude, the way conversation flowed like water, the way every act of nourishment reminded them they were part of something vast and eternal. So tonight, as you imagine those ancient feasts, the golden light of oil lamps flickering upon faces, the clink of pottery, the gentle hum of a lyre, perhaps let yourself feel the same quiet contentment. The food may be gone, the laughter faded, but the spirit of shared humanity remains, whispering across centuries like the scent of wine still lingering in an empty cup. If you could walk through an ancient Greek market in the soft light of morning, you would find yourself surrounded by the pulse of daily life. The air would shimmer with the mingled scents of olive oil, dried fish, fresh herbs, and warm bread. Beneath canopies of woven reeds, traders called out their wares in voices that carried over the clatter of amphorae and the hum of conversation. It was a living orchestra of sound and scent, rhythmic, grounded, eternal. Here, food was both art and philosophy. The Greeks believed that flavor mirrored the harmony of the universe. Balance was everything. Sweetness and salt, bitterness and spice, all had to coexist as the elements themselves did. Earth, air, fire, and water. To prepare a meal was, in its quiet way, an act of cosmic alignment. Olive oil was the lifeblood of Greek cuisine. Pressed from the fruit of Athena's sacred tree, it glowed like liquid sunlight. Farmers crushed olives between stone wheels, letting the thick, green-gold liquid flow into clay jars. This oil touched every meal. It softened bread, enriched stews, and anointed the skin during rituals. Even today, its aroma carries something of the divine, a whisper from the groves of Attica. Then there were herbs, thyme, sage, oregano, and rosemary. They grew wild among the rocky hills, perfuming the air where goats grazed. These herbs were not just for taste. They were medicine, protection, and poetry. A sprig of mint might freshen breath before gathering. Basil could be planted near the doorway to ward off misfortune. When mixed in a food, they gave not just nourishment, but harmony. Salt came from the sea, gathered from shallow pans where the Aegean's waves evaporated under the summer sun. To the Greeks, salt was purity itself, crystallized sunlight, a gift from Poseidon. Its presence at the table symbolized hospitality and honesty. To share salt was to make a bond. Honey, too, was a sacred sweetness. The bees of Mount Hymettus were famed throughout Greece. and their honey was prized for both flavor and symbolism. It sweetened barley cakes, mixed into wine, and was offered to gods and the dead alike. In temples, honey was poured in small libations to honor Demeter and Persephone, its golden threads linking life and afterlife. Imagine a cook in a modest Athenian home, perhaps a woman tending a clay pot over glowing embers. She stirs lentils with a wooden spoon, adds a drizzle of oil, a pinch of herbs, and a splash of vinegar. The scent rises humble but rich. Around her, children chatter softly, and from a nearby window comes the sound of sandals on the street. There is nothing extravagant in her meal, just warmth, patience, and rhythm. Yet in that simplicity lies the wisdom of generations. For the wealthier households, meals could be more complex: grilled fish seasoned with coriander and garlic, roasted fig stuffed with nuts, or barley loaves scented with sesame. Cooks employed by noble families often learned from travelers or slaves from distant lands, blending influences from Egypt, Persia, and the Levant. Through these exchanges, Greek cuisine evolved into a quiet dialogue between worlds. The philosopher Epicurus, who taught that pleasure was the highest good, once wrote that the finest meal need not be elaborate. A piece of bread, a bowl of olives, and a cup of water could bring peace if taken with gratitude. To him, the art of eating was the art of living moderately, savoring what was before you rather than yearning for excess. Recipes were rarely written, but some survived through poetry and prose. In a few fragments of verse, we find instructions for making kykeon, a sacred drink used in the Eleusinian mysteries. It was a simple mixture: barley, water, and mint, but it held spiritual weight. Pilgrims drank it in silence before partaking in the secret rites honoring Demeter and Persephone. The drink represented transformation, the turning of grain into nourishment, death into renewal. Elsewhere, in medical texts and temple inscriptions, herbs appear again, each one a quiet symbol. Bay leaves for Apollo, fennel for Dionysus, garlic for protection. The act of cooking became a bridge between health and holiness. To season food was to whisper to the gods through scent and flavor. And when night came, when the hearth cooled and families gathered in the soft glow of oil lamps, meals often ended not with indulgence, but with quiet gratitude. A small offering, perhaps a few crumbs of bread or drops of wine, was left upon the table for the household spirits. This gesture, repeated across centuries, blurred the line between the living and the divine. The rhythm of Greek flavor was never about abundance. It was about harmony, the balance between hunger and satisfaction, between need and celebration. The ingredients of their world were simple, but their meaning profound. Each one carried the memory of land, labor, and faith. So, as you picture those ancient kitchens and markets, let your thoughts drift like the smoke of a small fire curling into the evening air. Imagine the quiet murmur of voices, the steady sound of a pestle grinding herbs, the golden gleam of oil pooling in a shallow dish. Perhaps you can almost taste the warmth of bread baked on a stone, or the salt of the sea still lingering on a fig leaf. In that stillness, you might sense what the Greeks knew so well: that every meal, no matter how simple, was a celebration of life's gentle balance. A reminder that the divine could be found in something as small as a drop of honey or the scent of rosemary carried by the wind. In ancient Greece, dining was never just about food. Beneath the soft glow of oil lamps, where laughter and music drifted like smoke, there was another layer, a quiet theater of influence, hierarchy, and unspoken competition. The table was both stage and battlefield, where the politics of power unfolded not with swords or decrees, but with shared cups of wine and the measured tone of conversation. At the grandest banquets, the seating itself spoke volumes. Reclining couches arranged in perfect symmetry reflected not equality, but rank. The closer one sat to the host, the higher one's status. In the polished courtyards of Athenian statesmen or Spartan commanders, these arrangements were subtle proclamations of order. A misplaced guest could cause murmurs, even offense. The Greeks understood that social harmony, like music, required careful tuning. Wine flowed freely but never recklessly. Slaves mixed it with water according to strict ratios: 3 parts water, 1 part wine. The dilution was more than custom. It was a metaphor for moderation, a reflection of civic virtue. To drink unmixed wine was to risk chaos, to abandon reason, to resemble the barbarians beyond the Greek world. And so, every cup was a small act of restraint, every toast an affirmation of self-control. But the talk that accompanied the wine, that was where true influence resided. Between bites of roasted fish and figs, men discussed philosophy, law, and war. Generals boasted of victories. Poets recited verses that veiled political commentary in metaphor. A well-placed observation, delivered softly amid laughter, could shift alliances or stir rivalries. The symposium thus became a crucible of ideas, a setting where the fates of cities could quietly change. Athenian democracy, for all its openness, often began in whispered debates over dinner. A statesman's opinion on trade, a philosopher's reflection on justice, a soldier's tale of courage, all could ripple outward like concentric circles on water, shaping the currents of policy. Even within the intimacy of shared food, there was hierarchy. The servants moved like shadows, present but invisible. Their silence was part of the ritual, their gestures precise, their eyes averted. They carried trays of fruit, filled cups, replaced plates, all without disturbing the flow of conversation. The entire scene operated like a living mechanism, its parts moving in harmony, guided by centuries of custom. In Sparta, communal dining carried a different tone. There, men of all ranks gathered in syssitia, mess halls where equality was enforced by discipline. The food was simple: barley bread, cheese, figs, and the infamous black broth made from pork and vinegar. To the Spartans, the plainness of their meals symbolized strength and unity. Eating together was not pleasure, but preparation. It was said that foreign visitors who tasted the broth grimaced in disgust. Yet for Spartans, it was a source of pride, the taste of endurance, of loyalty to the state above self. Across the Aegean, in the courts of tyrants and kings, feasts became instruments of spectacle. In Syracuse, Corinth, and Macedon, rulers used opulent banquets to display power. Tables overflowed with imported delicacies: dates from Phoenicia, spices from the east, rare fish from distant seas. Gold cups gleamed under torchlight, and music filled the air with the illusion of divine favor. These gatherings were not for pleasure alone. They were performances meant to dazzle allies and intimidate rivals. Yet even at these glittering tables, silence carried meaning. A guest who spoke too boldly could offend the host. One who remained too quiet might seem disloyal or ungrateful. The art of dining among the elite was a careful balance of speech and restraint. To navigate the feast was to navigate politics itself. Outside these circles, ordinary people sometimes glimpsed the power of such events only through stories. The commoner's feast might echo faintly with the ideals of equality, but never the grandeur. Still, there was a certain comfort in distance. For those who lived close to the earth, a simple meal under the open sky held a different kind of dignity, a freedom untouched by the games of power. The philosopher Socrates often attended banquets, though he dressed plainly and ate modestly. His presence alone unsettled some of his peers. When others drank deeply, he remained steady, questioning, observing. He used the table not to flatter, but to teach. Over cups of wine, he would gently challenge his companions. What is virtue? What is justice? What does it mean to live well? In this way, the symposium became not only a site of politics, but of philosophy itself, a place where truth might emerge, quietly, between sips of wine and thoughtful silences. As night deepened and the torches flickered lower, the rhythm of conversation softened. The host might call for music or for a final libation to Dionysus. Guests, their minds drifting between philosophy and fatigue, reclined back and watched the shadows lengthen on marble walls. Power and pride dissolved, if only for a moment, into the shared stillness of human company. For in the end, all the hierarchies faded with the light. The table, once a stage of politics and ambition, returned to simplicity, a surface for bread, wine, and the warmth of voices. When the guests finally rose and stepped out into the cool night air, the stars above them were the same for all. Even now, across time, that truth remains. Every feast, however grand or humble, ends in silence. The music fades, the torches die, and what lingers is not the display of wealth or power, but the memory of connection, the soft murmur of conversation, the glimmer of shared understanding before the quiet returns. And so, the night grows still once more. The lamps that once illuminated marble halls and humble homes alike have long since gone dark. The echoes of laughter, of argument, of song and ritual have faded into the quiet rhythm of passing centuries. Yet somewhere, perhaps within your own thoughts, the traces of those forgotten festivals still linger. We began our journey amid the clamor of Greek markets and the fragrance of wild thyme. We walked through processions where mortals honored gods with music and dance, where firelight painted golden patterns upon the stone. We stood among scholars, farmers, priests, and poets, each one bound by the same invisible rhythm that moved the ancient world. Through their rituals, their meals, and their moments of silence, we glimpsed the delicate thread that connects the past to the present, a quiet longing for meaning, for balance, for peace. As you rest now, imagine those distant shores once more, the olive groves under moonlight, the steady hum of cicadas, the sea breathing softly against the rocks. The same stars that watched over Athens, Delphi, and Sparta still hang above you tonight, unchanged, patient, eternal. The lives that filled those cities have long since drifted into memory, yet their stories remain, softly murmured through time like a lullaby carried by the wind. The ancient Greeks found comfort in rhythm, in the turning of the seasons, the repetition of festivals, the dependable rising of the sun. In their rituals of food, song, and quiet devotion, they found what all of us seek still, a sense that life, for all its struggles and uncertainties, follows a pattern, an order both fragile and enduring. Perhaps, as you drift toward sleep, you too can feel that rhythm, the pulse of time slowing to a gentle cadence, the steady breath that mirrors the tide, the soft murmur of the past blending with your dreams. History, after all, was never meant only to be remembered. It was meant to be felt. So if this quiet story of ancient festivals, of forgotten prayers and simple feasts has brought even a moment of peace to your evening, that is enough. If this calm retelling has helped you unwind, helped your thoughts grow softer, then you have shared in the same stillness the ancients once sought beneath their endless sky. Thank you for joining me tonight, here on Sleepy Historian. If this kind of boring history for sleep brings you rest, feel free to like the video, but only if it truly helped you drift a little closer to calm. Subscribe if you'd like to fall asleep again to relaxing history storytelling, soft-spoken documentaries, and gentle explorations of ancient worlds. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to imagine how many others are out there, quietly falling asleep to the same old stories. So now, let the world of the Greeks recede like the tide. Let the temples and marketplaces fade into mist. Let the music grow distant until only silence remains. The night is deep, the world is quiet, and the past, for now, can rest.